My name is David Dubin, and I am a three-time cancer survivor, and I'm going to tell you about my journey with cancer. So my history with cancer goes back to 1997 at the age of 29 when I was having symptoms of colon cancer. For those unfamiliar, typically colon cancer manifests itself as this feeling that you have to go to the bathroom all the time, but unfortunately not a lot comes out and most of it's bloody. No, I'm not kidding. That is colon cancer, so get used to it. Sorry. It turns out I had stage 3B colon cancer, and I wound up having surgery and chemotherapy. And it was kind of like a rite of passage, considering that my grandfather had colon cancer before me, my father. And then ultimately, my older brother wound up having colon cancer. So it just seemed like something we did. We had surgery and we moved on. At that time, I had one son. I had recently gotten married, and we had our first house. A lot of it was chalked up to stress. So obviously I was misdiagnosed initially, but eventually it got taken care of. It wasn't until 10 years later when colon cancer came back a second time, really people started freaking out and started looking into something along the genetics line. Now, again, you guys may be used to genetics as a common conversation. Back then it was not. So after colon cancer surgery number 2 in 2007, I had genetic testing, and it was determined that I have something called Lynch Syndrome. So Lynch Syndrome may be something you haven't heard of, but it's actually very prevalent. It's estimated that 1 in 279 Americans has a Lynch mutation, and 95% don't know about it. So it means that there are about 1 million people in the U.S. walking around with a mutation that they don't know about that could cause them to have cancer at a very young age, men or women. Men, obviously colon cancer, but other types of cancers, women, gynecological cancers, as well as colon cancer, as well as other cancers. So I started having other types of testing done besides a colonoscopy to determine what, if anything else, was growing inside me. Turns out I had a kidney tumor. Again, I had no symptoms. It was just one of those things that I found because I was looking for it, had it removed, and we moved on. By now, I have 3 kids, all sons, and we realized that this could affect them as well as me. So we did 2 things. One is we started a foundation. We called it Alive and Kicking. The name comes from my love of the game of soccer, which I think Wake is pretty good at. So regardless of the number of surgeries and cancers and everything else that I found, I still played the game that I love. Do a lot more coaching now than I do playing as I've gotten older, but seemed like a pretty appropriate name. And we started talking to the boys about having their own genetic testing. We decided to wait until they would turn to 18 so that the genetic testing decision was theirs. They would be adults. So our oldest, after he turned 18, had his genetic testing. He came back positive. So he started seeing the same doctors that I see so that we can prevent him from having cancer. Or if we do find it, we find it at a very early stage. He is now actually 25. He graduated with a master's in medical genetics from Tulane, and he actually works in the genetics field, which is pretty cool. Our second son, who turned 18, had his genetic testing, and he tested negative. So he's theoretically normal if there is such a thing that I can produce. He's now a junior at NYU. Our third son has not turned 18 yet. He's in the process of looking at colleges, so we'll see where he winds up. And we'll also see what happens to his genetic testing when he turns 18. It's essentially the proverbial flip of a coin to see if you inherited the mutation that I have. So 50-50 chance, and he'll be the tiebreaker. Some words of advice, if I can give it to you. I hope you don't mind. My recommendation would be talk to your families about their family history of cancer. You'd be surprised what you'll learn. There wasn't a lot of documentation that took place in the past, and even now, people don't talk about cancer. So the more you can talk about it, the more you'll find out about it. You could find out about someone having a colon cancer, a gynecological cancer, a random cancer. And when you put the pieces together, you realize that there may be a family history worthy of genetic testing. So I recommend doing that because if you do have a mutation the way I do, there's a possibility of developing cancer at a very young age. Secondly, genetics is a wonderful field, and cancer and genetics are expanding rapidly. So if you haven't thought about your major yet, I highly recommend genetics, especially if you're looking into the medical fields. And then, of course, guys especially, 2 words of advice. One, take up yoga younger than I did because it does wonders for you. I played ball and I didn't stretch enough, so I highly recommend. And secondly, go see the doctor before you need to. Men don't understand it. They typically go to the doctor only when a limb has come off. Get checkups, get screenings early. Don't be like me and wait until you're bleeding. That's not the goal. So those are my words of advice, and I'm sticking to them. So that's my history with cancer. My name is David Dubin, and I am alive and kicking.